this one is still good.
Do you know who we're filming? What is up, everyone? I am Riley Chase Fox, and today I have a very, very, very special person with me. So, let's introduce our guests today. They were born and raised in Washington State, started their career getting involved at the local church, being a part of the worship team by singing and performing in the community theater with their mother. They then landed roles such as Annie and Oliver. Fast forward to one summer, while in middle school, they went down to LA and took part in an acting summer camp. Correction, that's how they got into the plays with, which we are going to move into, which is a small role with Akeelah and the Bee. After a few years of going back and forth, they made the decision to move to Los Angeles, and they've been there ever since. They've been a part of tons of movies and TV shows such as Glee, Shameless, Awkward, Desperate Housewives, and you can hear their voice in popular animes and video games like Erased as young Aya, Anji Yuki in Love Live, School Idol Projects, Sailor Ten Nine Ko in Sailor Moon, Yuki Totobami in Kakaguri, and last but definitely not least, you can hear their voice as Mizuki in I, The Somnium Files, and Tornado of Terror in the second season of One Punch Man. We have a special person today. This person is willing and wanting to encourage and motivate as much as they can. They're always smiling, encouraging, and giving great advice, inspiring people, meeting new people, and creating meaningful friendships. This person is a coworker, a competitor, and a personal friend of mine. Everyone, let's introduce Corina Betker.
Let's go! Get up and go. Hey, you did it!
I did it!
You did it!
I'm so happy for
You
a
guys don't
second.
understand. He's been practicing my last name for the past hour, and he did it.
I did
Good
it.
job.
I had so much anxiety right now, dude.
That's great, because you got a lot of the other words wrong.
I did, and I knew I did. I was saying it in my head, and I was like, bro.
But you got my name right.
They're gonna bash on me for pronouncing all of these names wrong. All right, so good. The most important thing is I got the name right.
Yes.
All right, so this introduction right here, give us a little bit of the story that you can't put into words right here of your journey into the industry.
Yeah, so basically, I was 5 years old, and I was like, Mom, I want to be an actor like Jim Carrey in The Mask.
Yep.
That was my inspiration, was Jim Carrey in The Mask.
Love that movie.
They, for some reason, let a 5-year-old watch that, because now I watch it as an adult.
Yeah,
and I'm
and you're like,
oh,
this
that's adult.
adult humor for
Yup,
sure.
but I thought it was hilarious at 5. So I was like, that's what I want to be. And my mom, of course, being like, okay. But
Yeah.
she stupidly listened to me. and was like, let's see where this can go. And so, you know, she was really the instrument into getting me into like community theater. And then I was like, no, like seriously, I want to do this. This is what I want to be. I either want to do this or I want to sled in the Iditarod in Alaska. Those were my two choices, and my mom made the right choice.
Guess that's what you think of when you grow up in Washington.
Yep, Washington State, gonna move to Alaska and sled dogs in the Iditarod. But yeah, I wanted to be an actor, and so she was like, okay, then let's do this for real. And one of the things that she told me from the beginning was, I'm not going to lead you, you have to lead me. And so there were definitely times where she sat me down and she was already like, I'm already leading you. I'm not going to be a stage mom. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be the one pushing you to do this. That's not how this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it was definitely me being like, no, I want to do this. Hey, and yeah, she was the mother. So of course she was looking for these things, but it was more like, do you want to do this? Do you want to go into this summer camp? Do you want to try out for theater in Seattle and stuff? And I was like, yes, always, yes. And I got my first role in Roar the Grease Paint Smell of the Crowd as one of the urchins. That was like my first paying job in Seattle.
Okay.
For the Second Story Repertory Theater, and I was 8 years old. And yeah, and then funny enough, later that year, I got like an agent in Seattle, which you don't need one in Seattle.
No,
so,
definitely not.
But I did get a job through them. I got one job, and it was actually my first voice
Really?
role ever. Yeah. It was for a, so you know, PAX happens every year, and this was back when PAX was really just people in the industry of video game making.
Okay.
And that, you know, that's a big convention in Seattle, and they were, you know, showing off a video game, and they had me and a few other little girls, like, record this weird chant, like it was I remember them describing it, it was like, so we want this, like, when you're, you know, skipping rope.
Yeah.
Right? But it's gonna be creepy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we actually got the recording later on, and we got to hear it, and it sure was creepy, because we're talking about like some hellhound, like the evil hellhound reared his head, and through his smile, this is what he said. That's the only part I remember.
Oh my gosh, bro.
And so
I'm sweating. Okay.
That was played in at PAX for like a video game, and I still don't know what that video game was to this day.
You haven't looked it up?
No.
Dude, because that had to have been what, in like early 2000s?
It was before then.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Dude, dang.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. But yeah, those were my first two jobs. Getting into the industry. And then it was just constantly, like, being, like, super focused and, like, this is what I want to do. Let's find the right teachers. Let's find the right people to get into the industry. And then I started getting really, really sick at the age of 12. And the doctors were like, we don't know what it is. It could be cancer. And I was like, cool. That's awesome. And for 4 years, I was basically told, either you're anorexic or you have cancer. And I was like, do those have to be my two choices?
Yeah.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really a big deal until my brother started showing symptoms too. And then it was like, oh shit, now we really need to find out what's going on, because now the brother's showing symptoms. And I, at the age of 16, I did a colonoscopy and an endoscopy, and I was also 5 feet, which I currently am, and I was 79 pounds, which I'm definitely not supposed to be, 5 feet tall. I know I'm small, but that was dangerous.
Tiny, very tiny.
And they discovered that I had Crohn's disease. So then it was a matter of, okay, now I need to figure out how to work with an autoimmune disorder, which is a chronic condition, there's no cure, how to work with that and still do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And,
well, it's gotten better because she's still 5 foot tall, so that's for sure, but your body looks healthy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It doesn't look, because you can tell, you can look at someone and be like, okay, like they look sick. No, you don't look sick.
Yeah.
You don't look
not
skinny.
Right now, anyway.
You don't. And you're gonna keep getting better. I know you are. Okay.
Thank you.
She's better now. A lot better now.
Yeah, and then, so I actually ended up, like, I was going through school normally just, like, flying back and forth, because luckily my dad's a pilot.
Hey.
So I got to fly down to LA for, auditions, and then come back and still go through school and everything like that. And then at the end of junior year, I got sick again, and it was right during finals. And I was doing early college, so I was still a junior in high school, but I was at a college. And all of my professors at the college said, don't worry, you'll do your finals when you come back. You're in the hospital, you're literally dying. We're not gonna force you to do it. You're fine. And I was like, cool, I'm set, right? And then I'm still in the hospital 2 weeks later, and my high school calls me and they go, you failed junior year.
What?
Yup. And I was like,
dude,
I'm getting A's and B's at a college. What? And they were like, yeah, your final grades didn't come in on time, so you failed, and you're gonna have to redo it again. And so I was like, no.
No, you showed them that you physically could not be there.
Even with the doctor's note, they said there's nothing they could do. So even with my doctor saying, you don't understand, she's dying. She's
Right.
dying right now. We need to pump her full of stuff. They were still like, there's nothing we can do. She's just going to have to redo junior year. And I said, no, I'm moving to LA instead. So I don't have a high school diploma because of that.
Well, turns out you don't need a high school diploma in order to make a career in voice acting
No.
and to be successable.
And you don't need a high school diploma to still get an AA in college, which I ended up doing
Yeah.
actually eventually.
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, I moved down here instead because I was like, there's no way I'm gonna redo my year when I didn't fail. I didn't. I was having A's and B's. They just failed me. It's ridiculous.
It sucks, but that's
Yeah.
unfortunately how it was.
And I actually already had my California proficiency test done down here.
I would rather you fail your junior year
Yeah.
than to go through any of that.
Yeah.
And I definitely know that I would be like, no, have her fail. I don't even care if she fails. I want
Well,
Karina here.
Well, that's what my parents were like too. They were like, wow, she was gonna stay and like actually continue, but then you guys screwed her over like that. So my parents didn't even care at that point because they were like, clearly your good grades didn't show them anything. Screw it.
Yeah.
My parents, like, it's funny because they've always been like, no, you gotta do good at school and then you get a good job. And then once that happened to me, they were like, that's not fair.
That's not.
So I was very grateful that, like, that was the one time that my dad, who's so rigid on his rules, was even like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
She's
no.
literally dying in the hospital. What do you want her to do?
Yeah.
And, so yeah, I moved down here and I, continued to do on-camera stuff while being told constantly, like, you should do voiceover. And I was like, I don't know how to get into that because shockingly, even though it's in the same city, it is a different industry.
It's a completely different
Yeah.
industry. It's a completely
There's a different
skill
way
set.
to get into it. There's a
Yeah.
different way to baseline acting is all the same through theater, through on camera, and through voice acting.
Yeah.
But even through all three, you still need a different teacher for all three because there's different styles. There's different styles, and there's different styles within those facets
Yes,
too.
there
Like
are.
there's a difference between comedy, drama, dark comedy, like all those things, and then you get into like voiceover, and there's a difference between video games, what type of video game it is, a difference between cartoons, what type of cartoon is it? Is it for adults? Is it for children? What's the age range? Like there's so many things that go into how you act and what's the difference between all of them. So yeah, and then I got into voiceover finally because I met my good friend Jeremy Bloom, whose father is Steve Bloom.
What the heck, dude? I am like, do you know Brandon too?
Yeah, I do.
Whoa, this is a small world, dude.
I'm mostly
Wow.
friends with Jeremy though.
What? See, I didn't know he had another. I only know of Brandon because of the classes that I'm in.
Yeah.
So is Jeremy older or younger?
Jeremy's older. Yeah. I'm really good friends with Jeremy. And he was like, I was like, oh man, I would love to get a voiceover. And he was Jeremy's like one of the nicest people also on the planet. And he was like, well, let me get you in touch with my dad and he can like give you some advice.
And you had no idea who his dad was.
Oh, I knew who his dad was at the
immediately.
time.
So
Yeah.
you were already like, dude, I am.
Well,
freaking
because like when my
out.
friends introduced him, they were like, "Oh, you'll know his dad. His dad is Steve Bloom," and I was like, "Oh, cool, that's awesome."
Yeah.
And but yeah, I didn't like the one thing is that I never asked for that. Jeremy's just the kind enough person to offer that because I wasn't expecting that. I would have never asked for that because like Jeremy's not my friend just because Steve Bloom's his dad.
Exactly.
And I hang out with Jeremy a lot more than I do with any of his other family. That was like, yeah, I got to meet his dad, and his dad was like, here's where you start, and here's where you can take a class. And I started taking classes at Bang Zoom, and then also with Charlie Adler. And
I know Charlie Adler, yeah.
Charlie Adler's my mentor, and I love him.
Dude, he's a big name, and he knows exact. He's tough. He's tough.
Yeah.
But he knows what he's talking about.
He is one of the people that I'm like, every time I take a class with him, I book something after. And I'm like, I don't have that experience with any other teacher in my whole career. That's insane to me. But I'm like, it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously acting needs to be there. You need to be an actor.
Yes.
That's first and foremost, as you always have told me, Ronnie. You need to act. And I said,
Yeah.
Yes. But what
Actor.
skill sets do you think a person needs to have based on, like, I don't know, behavior, personality, that can really, really help them? Like, hey, look, you got some work to do, as everyone does. You're never, I think we're our own worst critic.
Yes.
So we always are going to say we're never where we want to be. And I think it's kind of ignorant for us to be like, oh, I already know so much. I don't need to learn anything else. No, you always have something to learn.
Well, especially because
Yes.
the industry always changes.
Exactly.
The style changes.
Exactly.
I don't act the same way I did when I was 8 years old.
No.
I wouldn't work.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
It's a completely different style.
Completely.
And I would say, like, the one thing that I would say is, like, the most important one is being able to take direction. That is actually what, like, because I would say even when I was 8 years old and I got hired, I didn't get hired because I was a good actor when I was 8. I got hired because I listened to the director and I took direction immediately. I didn't question it. I just did it. Good job, parents, for teaching me to do that.
To take direction. And something so simple.
Yeah.
Super
But,
simple.
like, even directors will say to this day, like, the hardest thing to get somebody to do is to get the mindset of what they have preconceived of how something should sound. When that's not your job as an actor. Your job is not to hear how it sounds and say, I don't think that sounds good. There's a reason why there's a director and a sound engineer there. That's their jobs.
Yep.
Your job as an actor is to act. So if that's the case, your job also is to almost be like clay. Your job is to be structurally sound enough that that you have a shape to start with, but the director can come in and mold you into whatever they want as well. And you can keep that shape after they've moved you, right? That's kind of like what I've always like learned from my teachers was like you need to be clay. If you're structurally sound and you have a direction, you have a shape already, but a director can come in and still change you.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to stay that way after they do that. And so like cuz that's the one thing that got me hired as a kid was that I could take direction. And it's something that to this day I still get compliments on is like, "Oh, thank God you're good at taking direction." And I'm like, "Oh, you clearly were with an actor that did not do that before."
Yeah. Dude, that's tough, and that's like, oh man, like you don't want to be that bad story.
No.
It's like, oh gosh, it's like, which I've experienced from tons of, voice acting friends or directors or classes that I took in. They've always said, like, look, there could be a point where, like, say we're auditioning for a same character. And I come in, and this ties down to being humble and being genuine and being kind. Don't do it for ulterior motives. People will catch
can
on.
totally
They will
see through
catch
that.
on, and it's wrong. Be a good person because you want and are genuinely a good person. But it's like if we go in, you and I audition for the same character, and I obviously want it more than you.
Yeah, of course.
But you take direction. You're kind. You're asking the right questions. You're doing what you're presenting yourself in a very professional way, and it's like we're both doing that. But they say, hey, you know what? The engineer or the secretary says, hey, you know what? Karina Kaur took direction really well. They did exactly what you told them to do, and the secretary up at the front said they were very kind to them. That plays a huge part in you getting casted. Things that people do not know about.
It's kind of funny when anybody like my boyfriend's an engineer, and so anytime like, look, engineers can't help you get into the industry, but they can sure make sure you never work again.
Dude,
Engineers, like, it's funny how many people go out to my boyfriend because he works with so many studios, and they're like, oh, can you get me in? And he's like, no, but I can make sure you never, ever work there. That's what I can make sure you do.
That's kind of, it's kind of intimidating and scary at the same time because it's like, you don't want to do or say something that could get on the bad side. So, like, what are things that you would be like, hey, be very careful in doing this way, presenting yourself this way, and saying these things? Does that make sense?
Honestly, yes.
Okay.
I would say start with online presence. What's really noticeable is when somebody is so desperate to get in the industry, they all of a sudden message all of the voice actors in the industry. We noticed that and it's not a good look, guys.
No.
We actually talk about it, and we're like, why is this person being weird to us? And I get it. You want to be friends with us because you think that's the way to get in the industry. But again, we can sense we are very protective of each other because there's been disingenuous people that just want to be our friends just to get in the industry.
And use you.
And and it's awful, and it's an awful feeling. And so when all of a sudden we notice, oh, you're not just messaging me, you're messaging 40 other of my friends. Cool.
Yeah.
Or one of the biggest ones actually happened to me recently is that I just was saying, gosh, I love photography. I really miss doing it.
Yeah.
And then somebody posted, that's great, I do photography too. And then they put their website there. And it was not only a photography website, it was a voiceover website too. And I'm like, you don't think I noticed that? Also, I didn't ask for your website. What makes you think I can? No. And so I actually responded because I'm very blunt with people. But I actually responded with, like, I don't know if you were intending to do this, but this isn't a good look.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they took it down, and they were like, I'm sorry, I just wanted to talk about, and that's fine. I understand that want, but when you go too far, you have to understand.
It's an honest conflict.
It's an honest, it just makes it very awkward for me too, because then I'm sitting there like, do you really want to show me your work, or do you want to show me your work?
Dude, it's...
And it's because there's been so many bad people that have tried to use us and abuse us and all these ways that you really have to think about, okay, am I coming on too strong? Just let it happen naturally. We're just people.
Literally.
If you just be like, okay, you're cool, awesome, and then leave it, we'll probably be your friend.
Yeah, literally is how it happened with me.
Yeah.
So I'm earning brownie points right now. I'm still working my way. I'm just kidding, dude, obviously. Well, that's, gosh, I think that comes back to you, like, I think getting in the right mindset, too, before you even start approaching it. Like, there was so many things I didn't even know about, like, things like, online presence as you're going back to. Like, a friend of mine that I trust very, very much is always giving me great advice. He is in the music industry. Completely different field, but there is some things that I could learn from that. And he was like, dude, like, if you're going to pursue this, like, your mind, like, number one thing that me personally, I had to get right with my family. I knew that was just me personally. I was like, I have to get right with my parents. I have to get right with my siblings, just because that makes me feel like, okay, I'm
on the right path.
I'm on the right path. Like, I got right with them. I got right with the people around me. Like, I cultivated and nurtured my mental health. That is so important. People do not realize, like, it is, you need to exercise your mentality. It needs to be healthy. It needs to be in the right space, because it can destroy you, and it's not a good thing to go through. It's horrible. I don't wish that upon anybody. So that's when I was really able to me, based on my faith or whatever it is, that helped me. And I was like, okay, now I'm thinking clearly. Now I'm knowing how to approach. Now I'm actually not being a selfish individual. I actually care about people. I care about, before it was like I was negative all the time. And like, I knew I was negative, but I couldn't get out of it. And it's some people, they're really trying. And my friends who were always positive fed off of that negativity. And when
they can read it in the room.
They could read it in the room, and I knew it was a problem, and I was like,
that's another thing, is like how you present yourself means so much more than people think.
Yeah.
Because if you come into that room and you're reading of, oh gosh, I don't belong here, they're not going to hire you again.
No.
You just made them feel nervous about them hiring you, because them hiring you, especially when you're newbie in the industry and you don't have the resume to back you up, you need to walk in there like you belong there. Because if you walk in there and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, then that makes casting and and the director be like, oh gosh, we made a mistake.
You need
because their jobs are on the line.
Classes. Take classes.
And be confident.
And be confident.
Or if you can't be confident, pretend you are. Yes. I do it all the time.
Yes, she does. But it's true. That's why, dude, every professional, every single person that knows the industry, they're going to say, take classes Learn how this industry works.
And that's not something you can teach yourself.
No, it's not.
How many times somebody has told me, I taught myself acting? I'm like, sure you did.
No,
Sure you did, bud.
Yeah.
And how's that working for you? What AAA game have you been on recently?
Yeah.
None? Says a lot. Cool.
Yep.
Keep going down the path you're going then.
It's not gonna work.
It's not.
And you're gonna waste so many years of your life, and it's just not fun. This industry, it doesn't like. Okay, so like when you're moving to LA, there is so much more variables to doing it. Like you gotta pay rent, you gotta find a space, you gotta be able to like. I've heard a couple of actors say they still had daytime jobs.
Yep.
And were still pursuing the voice acting industry. You know,
Yeah.
there's so what were some things that when you moved you were like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that I needed to worry about this.
So I had a different experience than most voice actors coming here because I had a lot of support from my family. And because of my illness, my parents were like, don't worry about working a second job really that much. I still had some second jobs here and there, but because Crohn's disease is a stress-related disorder, the more stressed out I would get, the more I would end up in the hospital. So they were like, concentrate on acting and get a job if you like, try to get a job here and there, but and then I was also going to school at the time, so they definitely like, you know, it was definitely a pattern where I had to sit down and be like, okay guys, I can only do so much, and acting's number one on my list, but then I can't do 40 million other things here, so I need help, and I because bottom line is going to the hospital is more expensive than rent. Even with insurance, the hospital is more expensive, and because actually it was after I booked a Got Milk commercial, and they flew me out to New York, and I was sick as a dog. You good?
Oh my gosh, bro! Like, dang, fly me to New York! Wow.
Yeah, they flew me to New York to film that, and I was very sick. I had lost a lot of weight again, and I ended up getting so sick that the day of the shoot, it was a 3-day shoot, and the first day of the shoot, it got to the point where I was throwing up in between takes. I had it was a Got Milk commercial, right? So it was like, name the ingredients in imitation milk, and then and me and this boy would like buzz in and be like, this, and I was like, carrageenan or something, and they were like, good, 9 more ingredients, and the boy was like, 9 more, and then I kept buzzing in with other answers. That was the commercial, and like we're at a podium for us to like hit the buzzers or whatever, and behind the podium right next to my seat is a bucket, so that way the minute that they say cut, I was like, okay, let's go for another one. and it was really bad, and you know, on set they always have a nurse, they have to legally, and the nurse took me aside at one point into a room where we were alone, and because I had lied and said it was the flu. I definitely knew it wasn't the flu. Definitely knew it wasn't. And the nurse comes to me and she's like, okay, so here's the thing. I am a nurse, so I'm covered, like, HIPAA law. I can't tell anybody else what you tell me confidentially. This isn't the flu, is it? And I started bawling and being like, I have Crohn's disease. I didn't think it was that bad. I just don't want to lose my job.
Yeah.
Because they still have a shoot to do, whether I'm sick or not.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, I understand that, but I can't legally sit here and not send you to the hospital.
Yeah.
It's that bad now.
Yeah.
And so I was like bawling. One of the set people were taking me to me to a hospital in New York where I knew nobody. I didn't know anybody in New York. My parents are in Seattle. My home is in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I'm like, frick.
Yeah.
I'm about to go into the emergency room in
choice
New
of
York, and I don't know what I'm going to do, and I call my agent, and I'm like, I just lost my job, and my agent knew I had Crohn's, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, I just lost the job, blah, blah, and I'm crying, and they're like, okay, well, what can we do here? And I was like, if you can tell them, it's a hard sell, but if I can just get medication from the emergency room, I will be fine for the next 2 days, right? And she was like, okay, I'll try. I'll really try to get them on there.
Yeah,
and at
yeah.
that point, they had already gotten the backup for me to on a flight from LA to New York because they were like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And they also called the producer. And the producer comes in apparently, and this is while I'm in the hospital afraid that I lost my job.
Gosh.
And the producer looks through all the footage that they did and were able to do. And this other girl is also coming in on a flight already. And he was like, oh, no, we're not hiring anybody else. I'll wait.
Dude.
And that never happens. And so the next day I come on set and I now have medication to help me get through it. And the producer like came up to me and he was like, I've never seen anybody able to act while throwing up in between takes.
And
That's amazing.
I knew he was going to say that.
Yeah.
If I was a producer and I saw that, I would have been like, that girl wants this.
She's
And
a
is
fighter.
Committed, and she is willing to be here sick like that. And that would make me feel like I love this project. I'm putting my money into it. And the fact that someone is willing to do that for me.
Because
in
that
my
means
project,
he's putting more money just to wait for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
And it's-
that's huge.
yeah.
Every
Yeah.
second counts
Yeah.
in this industry.
Mhm.
And you don't want to be the reason that they're waiting.
Of course. And it's tough. That was, for one, I applaud you.
Thank you.
So that's
But that
not
was, like,
anyone can do.
I mean, I totally everybody's journey is a little bit different.
Of course,
There's
of course.
many different ways to get
Of
in the
course.
industry, but you're right on saying like you need something that sets you on the right path. And for me, it was okay. I have this disease, but this industry isn't gonna wait for that.
No.
It's
And
not. And then I also have autism and I have ADHD on top of it too. And so then I'm like, okay, how do I work around that?
Yeah.
Like my journey was figuring out how do I work around my disorders and my disabilities so that I can still work in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was my path.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And you made it happen. And it's still working.
kind of.
It's working.
Yeah.
It's working. And I'm impressed. And that was I think that was something that kind of like when I had done I always mention this because this is it's a story that I'm passionate about because you can still pursue it. I had done one of the open auditions for Bang Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got the call back.
Yeah.
And I remember exactly where I was. It was 2016, November 2016, and I was pulling into the movie theaters. I was watching I think it's called The Night Before with Seth Rogen, Anthony Mackie, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And immediately when I parked, like seconds after I put the car in park, I get a call. And you know, like when you get calls, you're like, it's a spam call, like whatever. But I always told myself if I was ever gonna do auditions and stuff like that, and I saw like an LA Burbank,
Number.
I would answer it. I always told myself that. Well, I had done the audition, put it in my pocket, saved it, and I was like, it's done. Can't do anything else. Well, the caller ID said Burbank, and I was like, immediately I was like, no way, dude. And I answered it, and I was like, I think I told you the story already.
Yeah.
I think I did. Well, for the viewers, I don't know. So I answered it, and they're like, hey, I'm so-and-so from, Bang Zoom. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And then, like, I was trying to keep it cool.
Yeah.
So, what's up? And, well, I didn't say that specifically, but in my
So-
mind, I was like, oh my God. But I was like, yes, this is Ronnie Donaldson. How can I help you?
Yeah.
And then, and they were like,
Oh, we've all had those moments of, oh
Yeah.
my God.
Dude, it's...
I had one with Sam Riegel where I'm pretty sure I embarrassed myself for the rest of my life.